Brock University developed in 1964 with a number of academic faculties, graduate programs, buildings, residences, and competitive varsity athletics. Our school continues to expand with more student enrollments each year and developments in buildings such as cairns. However, since Brock's existence 50 years ago, it has lacked a football team. How does this affect the culture of Brock and its students compared to other Ontario universities? Is this a good or bad thing, and why? Throughout this documentary, we will explore the question looking at what we are truly missing out. OUA football is made up of 11 teams from the following schools: Carleton, Guelph, Laurier, McMaster, Ottawa, Queens, Toronto, Waterloo, Western, Windsor, and York. Ryerson and Brock are among the few universities missing from the conference, unable to celebrate the qualities the football game has to offer. Football has a way of attracting a large fan base, whether it's the NFL, NCAA, or OUA games. The game brings out a strong competitive spirit accompanied by strategic plays, entertaining aggressive behavior, top-conditioned athletes, positive school rivalries progressing the level of play, and an overall school culture centered around the popular sport. University homecoming is one of the biggest known party days on a student's calendar. Queen's University knows this day of partying all too well. In 2008, more than 5,000 students of Queen's University filled the streets in Kingston, Ontario. This party soon spun out of control. A car was set on fire, ambulance vehicles were blocked, and police were assaulted with bottles and flying debris. More than 19 people were injured, 42 people arrested, and over 200 liquor violations. With only 100 police officers to 5,000 students, the officers were outnumbered 50-1, resulting in a standstill of discipline. Queen's University had decided to cancel its next two fall homecoming celebrations because of the excessive partying and violence that followed. Is this something we want our school to be a part of? In contrast, during the homecoming games, football players have had added pressure to win with the amount of fans present and the spirit of their schools at risk.
The emotion I see is not joy. It's not pride. It's relief. It is relief. Because for 2 months, they weren't sure if they were good enough to be the best in the OUA. They did not know. They played with a sense of urgency, of fear, and a panic every time they took the field. And they got better, and they got better, and they got better. There are no do-overs after this one. What we've learned in this 8 weeks will be done, and then it's sink or swim, live or die.
Does that seem like a team we should have and support? A sport that relates their winning of a game to life or death, placing tremendous amounts of pressure on their players to perform for their team and school. A clear example of this pressure to be the best was shown by the players who were involved in the biggest steroid investigation in Canadian history during the 2009 to 2010 football seasons.
Speaking of disasters, that's what has happened to the University of Waterloo football program. The school has suspended all play for the year after news of one former player being charged with drug trafficking and 9 current players have been caught with steroids. This could not be more unfair for all the clean players, from the incoming freshman class to the seniors who have had their football careers snatched away. But you know what? I'm glad Waterloo did this. Maybe a punishment so severe like this will actually be an agent for change in a sport whose laissez-faire attitude towards steroids has created a system where it's easy to cheat and hard to get caught. Real change doesn't come from simple suspensions. It comes when you set the punishment so high that other schools have to stop and pay attention. I just hope that other football programs, the CIS, and the CFL takes notice and does something about it. Otherwise, Waterloo's sacrifice will go for naught.
Also, the pressure that Mac coach placed on his players is not the only problem there is with this video. It also displayed an overemphasis that these are the men of Mac, the men of McMaster University. What does this say about other McMaster's men's teams that showed just as much success in their given sport, such as the soccer and volleyball team? Are these OUA champions and student athletes any less of men? Equal emphasis should be placed on all sports, especially those who have achieved the equivalent levels of success, yet this is not displayed. This clip was taken from a 25-minute McMaster documentary on success of their 2012 football players. A clip like this could not be found for the other teams mentioned. If Brock were to eventually generate a football team, it may also go in this direction. A shift of focus and emphasize straying away from other teams, placing a higher priority on the competitive level of the football team. This could be in a sense of budget revisions, fan base, practice locations, and times those practices occur. Due to the small population of Brock, made up of only 18,688 students, and only 57% of those students being male, could we support both a rugby team currently comprised of 57 student athletes and a football team made up of 70 to 100 student athletes? We asked a member of the Brock rugby team, who played football in high school, how the option would have affected his decision. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
Okay, so do you think Brock should have a football team?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you have any reasoning as to why?
From what I've seen, a lot of the other schools that have football teams, it brings in a lot of revenue and it kind of builds like school spirit and stuff, so more people come out to games and things like that.
How do you think it would change the culture of Brock, or do you think it would have an impact at all?
I think like if we had a stadium where we could actually maybe like charge admission or get people to come, I think it would build school spirit and more people would be spirited and come out to more games, maybe like basketball and hockey as well.
Would this option in sports in choosing rugby or football?
Not at all. I've been playing rugby since I was in the 9th grade, and I'm not really big on football anyway.
Do you think there would be enough students to have both teams to be competitive with other schools? Do you think a lot of people would switch from rugby to football?
I don't think a lot of guys would switch from rugby. We have had a couple guys that have switched from football at other schools, and then they come and they'll play rugby. But I think we could field both teams because we have like 18,000 students or something. So.
Yeah. Would you say that the majority of the football players moved to intramural football or took up rugby? What do you think their reasoning was?
Or if they wanted to get involved in a new sport, they came to rugby.
So lastly, would you be concerned with the status of rugby if Brock created a football team?
Brock rugby's been around since I think 1970, so I think it would keep going.
Keep going. So here's a final question for you. Do you think a greater population of the school will face more injuries, such as concussions, if we were to have a football team?
I guess so, but that's because that's what happens when you add another contact sport. A lot of people get concussions in football, so injuries happen. It is what it is.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is the cost greater than the glory? Football is a contact sport. Intentional collisions and tackling is inevitable. Due to the size of these players, collisions can result in severe injury. There are some injuries players can never come back from. Concussions are injuries that affect your everyday life, preventing you from eating, sleeping, studying, and socializing, among more. Isn't it hard enough to find time to balance school, athletics, and job commitments, let alone bringing on a sport that could potentially harm these athletes for life, not just their university careers?
Concussions occur in all levels of football, and 60% of these are from head-to-head collisions. In an impact lasting just 15 milliseconds, a player's head, on average, experiences almost 100 Gs of force. And collisions on special teams can result in forces of up to 190 Gs. 15 millisecond impact is equivalent to getting smashed in the head with a sledgehammer.
In a feasibility study conducted in 2004 by Lauren Adams and sport management students, the initial cost of a football team would be $8 million. The money would go towards playing fields, therapists, equipment, stadium, travel costs, salary for coaching staff, and renovating Brock's facility. A football program is not a logical choice with the $7 million deficit Brock currently has, with cuts occurring on the academic side. If a football team would be implemented while teaching staff and academic programs were cut, then what would this say about our student-centered schooling? Let's change the title to Athlete Students. All in all, a football team would bring about some huge changes for Brock University, good and bad. But the real question is, would you start up a team knowing what you know?